What are the right questions to ask when you're interviewing for a job? Are you gathering the right information about the company and about the position? And we all know that we should be asking good questions, but what makes a good question? And what are those questions saying about you as a candidate? Let's dig into it and see if we can do it in a better way. I had a client just this past week who was headed into a big interview, and I asked him to go over some of the questions he was going to ask his interviewer. And when we went over them, some of the questions were just not as effective as I wanted them to be, and the other questions were just pointed in the wrong direction. So here are a couple of questions he was going to ask. How did you get introduced to the company, and why did you decide to join? What has the product org achieved in the last year? What are the milestones ahead? What are the top qualities you're looking for in this role? And how do you see the industry evolving, and how is this company going to keep up and be a leader? Now, these may seem like common questions, and they are, and my issue with them isn't that they're bad questions, it's just that it's not clear what his intent was with the questions, and they might have unintended consequences. I'm going to go through 3 points that you can think about when you're coming up with questions for your interview, and then I want to take these questions that my client had and filter them through these 3 points and see how that changes things. The first point is that the intention of questions is not to just satiate your curiosity about the job or the company. The types of questions you ask and how you ask them can leave a really lasting impression on your aptitude, your attitude and demeanor, and they can be really influential in, your interviewer and how they form an impression about you in terms of being a cultural fit for the company. So if I was going to ask a question like, so what has the product org achieved in the last year? That may be a completely fair question, but it also has the potential to make the other person feel a little defensive the way I'm asking it. And it's important to remember in an interview, it's not just about impressing them with yourself. It's also really nice to open up opportunities for them to feel impressive as well. So instead of asking, what has the product org achieved in the last year, I could just rephrase that and say, so what are you most excited about that your team's been working on in the last year? And the way I rephrase that, I'm allowing them to talk about things that they are excited about that make them look good. And the positive part about that is it's also telling me what do they find valuable, what is most important to them, and that may be the most important part of this. When you're interviewing, you are in the sell yourself phase. And you might even say that you're always in the sell yourself phase if you're actively managing your career. No matter how desirable of a candidate you are, there's always more excitement that you can bring towards what you're doing and your work. And when you're in this phase, it's more important for you to figure out what's important to them than it is for you to figure out facts and, kind of information about the company that is important to you. This doesn't mean you can't ask questions about the job and the company that give you information about whether you want to work there. You absolutely can. But if you have a tough question, maybe wait until later in the process to ask it. And if you are asking questions, try to put it in a positive light and allow them to look good while they're answering it. The second point on asking good questions in an interview is to ask specific questions instead of general ones. When I ask a general question like, what are the top priorities for the team? Well, the answers tend to be somewhat bland and boring. People tend to generalize and pontificate about things that are kind of ambiguous, almost like marketing speak. But I prefer to ask questions that are much more specific and as it relates to me. The question I really like to ask is, if I was on the team right now, today, and I was completely up to speed, what are the first couple things you'd really want me to work on? What are the meetings that you'd want me to be a part of? Now, the reason I like that question is because it's specific and relates to me, and it gives me really valuable information about what is the problem they're trying to solve with this hire. What are the things that are really important to them right now? The third and final point about asking good questions in an interview has to do with how we tell stories when we're with friends versus when we're with strangers. When we're with friends, we tend to tell stories in the first person and try to put people in our shoes. So for example, if I said something to a friend, I might say it like, I was walking home and as I got into the crosswalk, I looked to my right and there was this homeless guy and he was crouched down, he had these big baggy overalls on and he was reaching into his pocket. And as I tell that story, I have you in my shoes in the first person. It's a much more compelling way to tell a story. Now, contrast that first person narrative with when we don't know somebody very well, we tend to be a lot more general and bland. So if I didn't know somebody, I might describe the same situation by saying, when I walk to work, I see a lot of homeless people. It's kind of a big problem in San Francisco. The point here is that when you're asking questions in an interview, in a situation where you don't know the person very well, it's much easier to create a sense of commonality and friendliness when you both tell stories in a first person narrative and you ask questions in a way that allows them to speak in a first person narrative. So if I ask a question like, what made you join the company? Not a bad question, but I might get a generic answer. And so it's better if you can take that question and then drive towards that first person narrative. And the way to do that would be something like, I'd love to hear the story about how you got introduced to the company. Like, who did you first meet? Can you walk me through like how you ended up here? First person narratives are more fun and easier to tell, and they're more fun and easier to listen to. So the more you can get them into your interview, the more friendly the process is gonna seem. I hope you found those 3 points and how to ask good questions in an interview really helpful, and that you can take them and kind of integrate them into your process of prepping for an interview. It's a really important part about leaving a great impression. There's a train going outside. Asking questions, I'm gonna try this. When am I gonna get it right into that expectation? What am I saying? Pontificate. I hope you found that helpful. If you did, let me know by hitting the like button, comment down below if you have questions, and of course, subscribe to my channel, coming at you with new videos each and every week. I'll see you next time.